There is something inside you that you don't want to see. You can feel it in the quiet moments, in the split-second reactions, in the patterns that keep repeating no matter how much you try to change. It's the part of you that speaks through shame, that acts through fear, that hides behind your excuses and your pride. It's the unseen hand shaping your choices, the whisper in your head that sounds like truth but feeds on lies. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the hidden dimension of your psyche, where every rejected part of you still lives, the anger you suppressed, the envy you denied, the desires you buried beneath guilt, the wounds you refused to feel. It's all still there waiting. And until you name it, it will keep running your life. You will keep repeating the same relationships, attracting the same people, reliving the same betrayals, suffering the same failures, not because the world is cruel, but because you haven't faced what lives inside you. You've mistaken avoidance for healing, control for strength, denial for peace. You've built a life around your light while pretending your darkness doesn't exist. But the truth is this: the shadow never dies. It doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It grows stronger in silence. It feeds on the parts of you you refuse to see, and eventually it takes over not as a monster under your bed, but as the quiet corruption within your choices. You think you're making decisions freely. You're not. You're acting out the programming of your unintegrated self. Every time you lash out at someone who mirrors your insecurities, that's the shadow speaking. Every time you sabotage something good because peace feels unfamiliar, that's the shadow acting. Every time you chase validation because you fear invisibility, that's the shadow steering the wheel. And the longer you run from it, the stronger it gets. That's why people live lives that feel like cages. That's why they drown in repetition. Because the unconscious is not buried, it's alive, directing your story from behind the curtain. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's not philosophy, that's prophecy. Your fate is not something written in the stars. It's written in your shadow, in the parts of you you refuse to confront. Every unhealed wound becomes a compass pointing toward your destiny. But most people spend their entire lives walking in the opposite direction. They chase comfort instead of truth. They anesthetize pain instead of understanding it. They mistake avoidance for enlightenment. They call it positivity, they call it spirituality, but it's just repression wearing a halo. Because real awakening doesn't come through light alone. It comes through integration, through walking into the dark and reclaiming what you left behind. The shadow is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It's the guardian of your authenticity. Every time you deny your anger, you suppress your courage. Every time you repress your jealousy, you bury your ambition. Every time you reject your sadness, you amputate your empathy. Your shadow holds the key to your power, but you'll never hold it if you're too afraid to open the door. That's why your life keeps circling the same themes, because you're being shown again and again what you need to integrate. Life is not punishing you. It's reflecting you. Every betrayal reveals your boundaries. Every heartbreak reveals your attachment. Every failure reveals your false identity. You're not stuck, you're being summoned. The universe doesn't repeat pain because it enjoys your suffering. It repeats pain because you haven't learned the lesson yet. And the lesson is always this: face yourself. Until you do, you will continue to live as a fragmented soul, half of you shining in the light of who you think you are, and the other half rotting in the dark of who you refuse to admit to being. And the shadow is patient. It doesn't rush. It waits in your subconscious, in your emotions, in your patterns. It waits for you to get tired of your own pretending. It waits for the moment when the performance collapses, when the mask slips, when your own perfection exhausts you, because that's when the real work begins. That's when you realize that enlightenment isn't rising above your darkness, it's descending into it with awareness. The ego wants to transcend the shadow. The soul wants to embrace it. Because the soul knows there is no wholeness without integration. The parts of you that you hate, the ones you condemn, hide, and judge, are not mistakes. They are fragments of your truth twisted by pain. Your anger isn't evil, it's power unexpressed. Your jealousy isn't weakness, it's desire unacknowledged. Your fear isn't failure, it's intuition misunderstood. Everything you repress becomes distorted. Everything you integrate becomes wisdom. That's the alchemy of the human soul transformation through awareness. When you name your shadow, you reclaim the energy you lost to shame. You begin to see the patterns not as curses, but as mirrors. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this showing me? And that's when power returns, because awareness is power. You start noticing how your reactions reveal your wounds. You see how your triggers point toward the parts of you that still need healing. You begin to understand that the world isn't happening to you, it's happening through you. Your relationships, your failures, your fears, they're not obstacles. They're messages. They're coded signals from your unconscious, trying to make you whole. And every time you ignore them, the message gets louder. That's why life will keep escalating your pain until you listen. The universe doesn't whisper forever. When you ignore the whisper, it sends you a scream. And for most people, it takes that scream, the breakup, the loss, the failure, the breakdown, to finally wake up, to finally realize that the pain wasn't punishment, it was initiation. That's what the shadow is, the dark initiation into authenticity. Because only those who've met their own darkness can truly be trusted with light. The people who pretend to be pure, they're dangerous. They project their own shadow onto everyone else. They moralize, they judge, they divide. They don't integrate darkness, they externalize it. That's why the world burns, because too many people are trying to destroy outside what they refuse to face within. Wars don't begin between nations, they begin between inner contradictions. And until you make peace with your own contradictions, you will keep feeding the same collective insanity, the endless projection of unhealed souls. Your personal shadow is the seed of humanity's darkness. Heal it, and you heal the world in miniature. That's why Jung said the most dangerous psychological mistake is to identify with only the light half of the psyche. Because when you reject your darkness, it doesn't vanish, it becomes autonomous. It acts out in your name. It wears your face when you're triggered, when you're cornered, when you're afraid. It becomes the voice that whispers you're not enough. It becomes the impulse that sabotages what you love. It becomes the part of you that betrays yourself just to avoid being alone. You think you're fighting the world, but you're really fighting your shadow. And the moment you see it, the moment you look into the mirror without turning away, something shifts. You realize you're not broken, you're divided. And division is curable, not through suppression, not through denial, but through ownership. The moment you say, yes, that's mine, the rage, the envy, the fear, the need for control, you stop being a victim of it. You stop being possessed by it. Because the shadow can only control what you refuse to claim. To name it is to contain it. You don't defeat darkness by fighting it. You defeat it by integrating it, by bringing it into awareness, by understanding its origin, by turning it from chaos into consciousness. That's what individuation is, the psychological rebirth Jung devoted his life to teaching. It's not the pursuit of perfection, but of wholeness. Wholeness means nothing is missing, nothing is denied, nothing is rejected. And that's where freedom begins. Because the one who integrates their shadow cannot be manipulated. They cannot be guilt-tripped. They cannot be controlled by fear, because they've already met their own. They've looked into their darkness and said, I see you. You don't scare me anymore. And when you reach that point, when you stop running from yourself, the entire world begins to change. You start to feel peace, not because life got easier, but because your perception did. You stop reacting to chaos, because chaos no longer mirrors your inner state. You begin to create instead of repeat. You realize that the darkness you once feared was never there to destroy you, it was there to refine you. Every shadow, when faced, becomes light. And every time you face it, you become more real, less of a persona, more of a soul. You stop living through masks, through conditioning, through other people's expectations. You begin to speak with your true voice, move with your true will, and love with your true heart. That's what it means to awaken, not to ascend, but to descend. To return to yourself, piece by piece, until nothing inside you hides anymore. Because the day you stop fearing your own shadow, that's the day it stops ruling you. And that's the day you finally become free. And freedom, when it finally arrives, doesn't roar. It doesn't come with thunder or lightning. It enters quietly, almost imperceptibly, like breath returning to a drowning soul. You don't even realize at first that something inside you has shifted until you notice that the things that used to control you no longer have power. The triggers that once dictated your reactions now dissolve into understanding. The patterns that once imprisoned you lose their grip, not because they disappeared, but because you finally saw them for what they were, unhealed echoes of yourself. That's the subtle, terrifying beauty of consciousness. Nothing outside you changes, yet everything feels different. You begin to walk through the same world but with new eyes. Eyes that see through illusion. Eyes that can watch anger rise without obeying it. Feel fear without retreating. Hear criticism without collapsing. You become the witness instead of the actor. And that's when you realize how deeply asleep you had been. For years, maybe decades, you thought you were making choices. You thought you were in control. But you were being puppeteered by ghosts, your wounds, your projections, your unacknowledged needs. You were mistaking reaction for choice, trauma for intuition, comfort for peace. And that's what the shadow does. It turns you into an unconscious participant in your own suffering. But when you finally name it, when you shine the light of awareness into its corners, it no longer needs to manipulate you. It begins to soften. The monster dissolves into a wounded child. And the child only ever wanted one thing: acknowledgement. The shadow doesn't need to be destroyed. It needs to be seen. You don't heal darkness by waging war against it. You heal it by holding a light steady enough that it remembers it was always part of the same whole. That's what Jung meant when he said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Because enlightenment isn't light. It's integration. It's the union of opposites. It's the reconciliation of what you are and what you pretend to be. And that's why so many people never reach it, because it demands everything they've built to protect their identity. It requires you to die before you die. You have to watch every illusion burn. The illusion of being good, the illusion of control, the illusion of certainty. You have to lose the comfort of being liked, the safety of conformity, the ease of ignorance. That's what it costs to be whole. Wholeness isn't happiness. It's clarity. It's the ability to sit with yourself without needing to escape. Because escaping is the oldest addiction in the human story, escaping into work, into pleasure, into distraction, into other people's chaos. But no matter how far you run, the shadow always follows. It doesn't need to chase you. It's attached to your very being. And yet, once you turn toward it, once you say, enough, it begins to change its shape. It becomes a guide, a compass, a map of everything you've suppressed, and therefore everything you still need to reclaim. You start to see that what you called flaws were actually undeveloped virtues. Your selfishness becomes self-respect once you learn to direct it. Your pride becomes dignity once it's cleansed of insecurity. Your rage becomes purpose once it's freed from repression. You realize that nothing in you was ever evil, only misunderstood. That's what the shadow wants you to see. It's not trying to destroy you. It's trying to complete you. And completion feels different than perfection. Perfection is a performance. It's the ego's desperate attempt to be worthy. Completion is surrender. It's the soul's return to what it always was. That's why when you finally integrate your shadow, you stop judging yourself so harshly. You stop playing the endless game of improvement. You stop trying to erase your past. You start to accept that the very things you thought disqualified you from love are the things that made you capable of it. Because compassion doesn't come from purity. It comes from contact with pain. The person who has never faced their shadow cannot love deeply because they haven't yet met the parts of themselves that make love necessary. And so you stop pretending to be good. You stop performing as enlightened. You allow yourself to be human, gloriously, painfully, honestly human. You cry when you need to. You rage when something is unjust. You forgive yourself for still being triggered. You give yourself permission to feel. That's what maturity looks like, not the suppression of emotion, but the integration of it. You begin to live with authenticity, not idealism. You stop saying what sounds right and start saying what feels true. You stop chasing validation and start seeking alignment. And slowly, the world around you begins to shift because as within, so without. When you stop repressing your darkness, you stop projecting it. You no longer need to demonize others to avoid your own reflection. You see through people's masks, but instead of judging them, you understand them. You can look at someone who's cruel and see their fear. You can look at someone manipulative and see their desperation. You can look at someone broken and see the mirror. That's not weakness. That's vision. It's the vision of someone who has walked through their own hell and come back with eyes that can see in the dark. That's what the world needs now, people who can see in the dark. Because everyone is busy shining light outward, preaching love while avoiding their rage, preaching peace while repressing their grief, preaching acceptance while rejecting their own reflection. And this collective avoidance has turned spirituality into theater, a performance of light that leaves the world no less blind. But the true mystic, the true philosopher, the true warrior of consciousness, they walk differently. They don't deny the dark. They carry it. Their peace doesn't come from absence of chaos, but from intimacy with it. They've sat with their pain long enough to stop fearing it. They've listened to their shadow until it started to speak wisdom instead of fear. They've realized that what we call darkness is simply light we're not ready to see. And when you realize that, life stops being something to fix and becomes something to understand. You stop fighting for control and start aligning with flow. You stop asking why me and start asking what is this teaching me? Because every trigger, every heartbreak, every disappointment is a message from your unconscious, a breadcrumb leading you back to yourself. And if you have the courage to follow them, you will find everything you've ever been searching for. The strength you admire in others, it's buried in your fear. The wisdom you crave, it's hidden in your mistakes. The love you long for, it's waiting behind your shame. Everything you're running from contains everything you're running toward. And when you finally stop running, when you stand still and turn inward, you'll see it. You were never broken. You were just divided. You were never lost. You were just avoiding the part of you that knew the way. And the moment you welcome that part, the moment you name the shadow, your life begins again, not as perfection, not as light, but as truth. And truth is not comfortable. It's not beautiful in the beginning. It's raw. It's disorienting. It's dismantling. But beneath that destruction lies freedom. Because the moment you accept every part of yourself, the saint and the sinner, the healer and the wounded, the victim and the villain, there's nothing left for the world to use against you. You become whole, and the whole person is untouchable. The whole person cannot be manipulated by guilt. The whole person cannot be controlled by fear. The whole person cannot be destroyed by failure, because they have already faced all of it within. They have learned that the only darkness that truly harms is the one you refuse to name. And when you name it, when you finally whisper its truth without shame, it becomes light. And that light is not fragile, it's not naive, it's not soft. It's the kind of light that's earned through fire, the kind that doesn't flicker when the wind rises. That's the light of awareness. And when you walk with it, you stop seeking enlightenment in the sky and start creating it on the ground through every action, every choice, every moment of consciousness. Until one day, you look back and realize your shadow is no longer behind you. It's beside you. And together, you walk forward no longer at war, but as one. And as you walk with it, something sacred happens. The war inside you ends, the noise quiets. The endless battle between who you are and who you think you should be dissolves. You begin to move through life without friction, without the constant drag of resistance. Because once you stop hiding from yourself, the world stops being a battlefield and becomes a mirror. Every moment becomes a dialogue between your light and your dark, the conscious and the unconscious, finally speaking the same language. And this, right here, is what the ancients meant by awakening. Not glowing halos or cosmic bliss, but the simplicity of seeing. Seeing yourself fully, seeing life clearly, seeing truth without distortion. You start to notice that the same darkness you once feared in yourself exists in everyone else. You see it in their words, their silence, their masks, their pain. But instead of judgment, what rises in you is understanding, the kind that doesn't excuse but explains. You begin to realize that every person you meet is wrestling with a shadow of their own, and the way they treat you has less to do with who you are and more to do with what they've disowned within themselves. So you stop taking things personally. You stop absorbing their projections. You stop letting other people's unhealed parts dictate your peace. You move differently now. You speak less, but what you say carries weight. You listen more, but you're no longer listening to react. You're listening to perceive. You love deeper, but without attachment. You forgive faster, but without forgetting. You hold space, but you no longer let others drain it. This is the power of integration. It refines everything it touches. Because when you make peace with your own shadow, you stop needing others to validate your light. You stop trying to prove your worth through performance. You stop chasing love that costs your authenticity. You learn that peace doesn't come from perfection. It comes from alignment. And alignment means no part of you is at war anymore. You are not pretending to be kind. You are kind because you've made peace with your cruelty. You are not pretending to be confident. You are confident because you've accepted your insecurity. You are not pretending to be wise. You are wise because you've faced your own foolishness. Every contradiction becomes harmony when awareness holds it. And through that harmony, you awaken an energy that has no opposite, what Jung called the self, the totality of being that transcends duality. This is not the ego, this is not the persona, this is not the identity built from memory and fear. This is the eternal witness, the consciousness that existed before your name, before your history, before your pain. When you reach this space, you begin to live from truth, not reaction. You no longer seek light because you are it. You no longer fear darkness because you understand it. And in that understanding lies liberation, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't boast, the kind that doesn't need recognition. It's the liberation of being whole. No more pretending, no more masks, no more chasing the illusion of becoming. You've already become. You've integrated the infinite into the finite. You've remembered who you are beneath the story. And that memory changes everything. Because once you've seen yourself clearly, you can never go back to sleep. You can never again live half a life. You can never again trade authenticity for approval. You can never again forget what your own soul feels like. And from this place, you start to see that every wound was sacred, that every betrayal was an initiation, that every failure was a necessary descent into awareness. You start to thank the shadow, not curse it, because it was your shadow that led you here, not your light. It was your shadow that broke you open, that forced you to stop pretending, that demanded you evolve or be consumed. It was your shadow that pushed you into the fire that burned away everything false. And now what remains is pure, not perfect, but whole. You stop fearing being misunderstood. You stop explaining your silence. You stop fighting to be seen, because you've realized those who can see you don't need explanations, and those who can't never will. The shadow taught you discernment, the wisdom to know who deserves access to your energy. And so you move through the world like a calm storm, powerful but grounded, intense but controlled. You carry both fire and water within you, and you know when to use each. You can stand your ground without aggression, and you can forgive without weakness. You can confront without cruelty, and you can walk away without guilt. You've become the balance that the world is starving for. And that balance makes you untouchable, not because you're hard, but because you're whole. Nothing can manipulate you anymore because you've integrated the parts of you that could be used against you. Shame can't control you because you've faced it. Fear can't paralyze you because you've befriended it. Anger can't consume you because you've learned to listen to it. You've turned every enemy within into an ally. And now, when you look into the mirror, you don't see the broken reflection of who you used to be. You see a warrior who fought in silence and won, not by conquering others, but by conquering the only battlefield that ever mattered, the space between your light and your dark. You realize now that the world outside you is just the canvas. The real work, the real revolution is always internal. And when enough people do this, when enough people face their own shadows, the world itself begins to heal. Because the collective darkness of humanity is nothing more than billions of unacknowledged shadows projected onto each other. Every war, every injustice, every act of cruelty is born from disowned pain. Heal the individual, and you begin to heal the collective. So, name your shadow. Speak its name with reverence, not fear. Bring it into the light, not to destroy it, but to understand it. Because the moment you say, I see you, you disarm it. You free yourself from the tyranny of your unconscious. You take the wheel back from the invisible forces that once steered you toward the same suffering. And in that moment, you no longer walk in circles, you walk forward. Every step becomes sacred. Every breath becomes prayer. Every experience becomes an act of awareness. You begin to realize that your life was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be conscious, because consciousness is creation. And the more you bring into awareness, the more powerful you become, not in domination, but in harmony. You are no longer reacting to life, you are creating it. You are no longer searching for peace, you are radiating it. You have become what Jung called the whole man, the one who holds both heaven and hell in his chest and calls both by name. And that's the paradox of awakening. You become lighter not by avoiding darkness, but by embracing it so fully that it loses its power to frighten you. You realize that the light is not the absence of darkness, it's the integration of it. And from that moment forward, your life becomes a living meditation. Every challenge becomes initiation. Every ending becomes birth. Every shadow becomes light waiting to be remembered. Until one day you stand still, calm, aware, at peace, and whisper to yourself the final truth. I am both the light and the dark. I am both the wound and the healer. I am both the fear and the courage that walks through it. And in that moment, the shadow no longer runs your life, because you have become the one who names it. And so it ends not with a victory cry, not with a final battle won, but with silence. A silence that hums with understanding. You stand at the center of yourself, neither saint nor sinner, neither light nor dark, just whole, just aware. You look around, and the world looks the same. The sky hasn't changed. The faces haven't changed. The noise hasn't stopped. And yet, everything feels different, because you are no longer lost inside of it. You are watching it all with the eyes of someone who has seen behind the curtain. You know now that every person you meet is fighting the same invisible war. You see the masks they wear, the walls they build, the shadows they run from. You no longer hate them for it. You no longer pity them either. You simply see them, and seeing them is enough. You have become the observer, the witness of humanity's great forgetting and great remembering. You are no longer trying to save anyone, because you finally understand. When you integrate your own darkness, you offer the world a light that doesn't blind, it guides. You become peace, not by preaching it, but by living it. And in that peace, you move differently. You love without fear. You speak without needing to be right. You walk into chaos without losing your center. Because you've made a home inside yourself, a place where the light rests beside the dark, where anger sits beside compassion, where fear bows before understanding. You have learned that there is no enlightenment without descent, no ascension without integration. The shadow taught you this. It led you down into the depths of your own being, stripped you of illusions, burned away every mask, and left you face to face with your truth. And you didn't turn away. You named it. You owned it. You became it. And now, you are something the world rarely sees. A human being who has met themselves completely. You are not afraid of your darkness. You are not ruled by your light. You walk the razor's edge between both with grace. When anger comes, you let it speak its wisdom, and then you let it pass. When fear rises, you listen, you learn, and you stay. When pain returns, you hold it like an old friend who once taught you everything you know about love. Nothing controls you anymore, not emotion, not memory, not shadow, because everything has a place within you now. That is the secret the ancients were trying to tell us. The philosophers hinted at it. The mystics lived it. The poets bled for it. Heaven and hell are not places. They are states of consciousness inside you, and the only way out was always in. When you name your shadow, when you sit with it and let it show you its truth, you stop living in fragments. You return to the original oneness that existed before you were taught to divide yourself. You return to what Jung called the self, that infinite awareness which holds all contradictions, all opposites, all life. And once you return there, there is no more running, no more pretending, no more fear. You become the calm in the storm, the stillness beneath the noise, the light that no darkness can consume. You are not free because the darkness vanished. You are free because it no longer terrifies you. And so you walk not as a seeker, but as one who has found, not as the wounded, but as the whole. Not as the fragmented self clinging to identity, but as the consciousness that transcends it all. You understand now. The journey was never about escaping the darkness. It was about remembering you were the light all along. And that light, your light, is not fragile. It doesn't need protecting. It doesn't need validation. It simply shines. It shines through failure. It shines through pain. It shines even through shadow, because it is the shadow made aware of itself. And that is the end of the journey and the beginning of all things. You will still stumble. You will still fall. But you will never be lost again. Because even in your darkest moments, you will feel it, the quiet pulse of awareness, whispering beneath it all. This too is me. And in that whisper lies everything. Peace, power, freedom. So when the shadow comes again, and it will, don't run. Don't hide. Don't pray for light. Stand still. Breathe deep. And remember, the shadow is not the end of your story. It's the place where your story finally becomes true. And the moment you name it, you become whole. You become free. You become infinite. That's how the darkness ends. Not in light, but in understanding.